Security guard blocks black woman from VIP event, realizes too late. She's the keynote speaker. Racist cop stops black doctor. Then learns she's racing to save a life, the surprise ending. On a quiet, dimly lit highway, Officer Ethan Carter was nearing the end of his night shift. At 42 years old, he was a seasoned officer, known for his sharp instincts and unwavering sense of duty. However, years of experience had also hardened him, making him skeptical of nearly everyone he encountered on the road. As he sipped his lukewarm coffee, the familiar silence of the night was suddenly broken by the sound of a car speeding past. His eyes darted to the silver sedan, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a blade. The speed was excessive, far beyond the limit, and something about the way the vehicle moved made his instincts kick in. Without hesitation, he flicked on his sirens and accelerated. His patrol car roared to life, closing the distance between him and the speeding driver. Behind the wheel of the silver sedan was Dr. Emily Parker, a 38-year-old cardiothoracic surgeon who had spent the last 14 hours in the operating room. She barely had time to process her exhaustion before receiving the urgent call. An 8-year-old girl at St. Mary's Medical Center was in critical need of a heart transplant. The donor heart, freshly retrieved, was waiting for her at the city airport. Time was everything. Every minute that passed increased the risk of the organ becoming unusable. Emily had no choice. She grabbed her medical bag, double-checked the preservation unit holding the heart, and bolted for her car. She knew the route by heart, 10 miles to the airport, no stops, no distractions. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, eyes darting between the road and the digital clock on the dashboard. 12 minutes left. She pushed the accelerator a little harder. Then, the sirens. Her heart pounded as red and blue lights flooded her rearview mirror. No, not now. She knew the law, she had to pull over. But the sense of urgency inside her screamed otherwise. Could she afford to stop? Would the officer understand? Would he listen? Taking a shaky breath, she made the only choice she could. She eased the car onto the shoulder of the road, her fingers trembling as she reached for her identification. The patrol car pulled up behind her, its headlights illuminating her rear window. Ethan stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. His expression was firm, unreadable, as he approached the driver's side. He tapped the window, his voice sharp and commanding. License and registration. Emily's pulse raced. She quickly lowered her window, her voice rushed but desperate. "Officer, please, I'm Dr. Emily Parker. I'm on my way to pick up a donor heart for a child. A little girl is waiting, and I have." Ethan's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the black bag on her passenger seat. His grip on his belt tightened. "What's in the bag?" he asked, suspicion lacing his tone. Emily swallowed hard. She could already see it in his face. He didn't believe her. Officer Ethan Carter stood firm, his expression unreadable as he waited for an answer. His question had been simple, yet the woman in front of him hesitated. "What's in the bag?" Emily Parker swallowed hard. She could see it in his face, doubt, suspicion, a mind already made up. She had dealt with skeptics before, but never in a situation where every second counted. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel as she tried again. "Officer, please listen to me. I'm a surgeon. There's a donor heart in that bag, and I only have minutes to get it to the hospital." Ethan's eyes flickered to the black medical bag resting on the passenger seat. It was large enough to hold just about anything. Drugs. Stolen goods. A weapon. His jaw tensed. He had heard every excuse in the book, and this one sounded just as convenient as the rest. He had seen people lie to his face without blinking. Why should this woman be any different? His grip on his flashlight tightened. "You expect me to believe that?" His voice was laced with doubt. "At this hour? Speeding like that? You're telling me there's a heart in that bag?" Emily let out a shaky breath, frustration rising in her chest. "Yes. And if you open it, the sterilization will be compromised. That child will die," she pleaded, hoping, praying, he would hear the desperation in her voice. But Ethan wasn't ready to listen. He had been here before. 3 years ago, he had pulled over another driver, a young black man speeding recklessly down the highway in the middle of the night. That stop had ended in tragedy. His 17-year-old son had died because of that man, a hit-and-run that left his life in pieces. The driver had fled, was never caught, and Ethan had been left to bury his only child. Since then, every reckless driver at night felt like a threat. A symbol of his pain. And now, here was this woman, black, speeding, and acting suspicious. He didn't care that she was wearing scrubs. He didn't care that she spoke with the urgency of someone telling the truth. His instincts told him something wasn't right. Emily saw the way his expression hardened, how his hand hovered near his holster. Her heart pounded. "Step out of the car," Ethan ordered. Her stomach dropped. "No, no, please," she begged. "I don't have time for this. You're making a mistake." Ethan ignored her. "Step out." With shaking hands, Emily unbuckled her seatbelt and slowly pushed open the door. The cold air hit her skin as she stepped onto the pavement, her entire body trembling. Before she could say another word, Ethan turned her around and snapped handcuffs onto her wrists. Panic surged through her veins. "No. You don't understand." Ethan wasn't listening. The clock was ticking. And a little girl's life was slipping away. Emily's breath came in short, panicked gasps as the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. Her mind was screaming, her body shaking, not from fear for herself, but for the little girl waiting on an operating table, unaware that her second chance at life was slipping away with every wasted second. "Officer, please," she begged, struggling against the cuffs. "You don't understand. That heart, it's got minutes left before it's no good." But Ethan Carter wasn't budging. His grip was firm as he guided her toward the backseat of his patrol car. To him, this wasn't about some urgent medical mission, it was about control, about following protocol. He had spent years watching people lie, manipulate, and twist the truth to escape consequences. He wasn't about to be fooled again. "You're under temporary detainment until I verify your story," he said flatly, pushing the car door open. Emily twisted toward him, desperate. "Call the hospital. Call the transplant team. I can't sit here while a child dies." Ethan didn't answer. He reached for his radio, pressing the button. "Dispatch, I need verification on a Dr. Emily Parker. She claims to be on a donor heart retrieval mission. Can you confirm?" Static. Then, a crackled response. "Stand by for confirmation." Ethan nodded, satisfied. It would take a few minutes. He had time. But Emily didn't. From inside the patrol car, she struggled against her restraints, watching the dashboard clock tick away the final moments of hope. 12 minutes. 11. 10. Her entire body tensed with frustration. "You're making a mistake," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I don't have time for this." Ethan, arms crossed, simply leaned against his car, watching her. Unmoved. Then, a voice from the sidewalk. "Hey, man, I heard her. She's a doctor." Ethan's head snapped toward the bystander, a middle-aged man in a worn denim jacket who had stopped near the scene. He had heard everything. "She's telling the truth. I read about a transplant happening tonight," the man added, stepping closer. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Sir, step back." "No, you step back." The man shot back, his voice rising. "You're wasting time while a kid is dying. What the hell's wrong with you?" Ethan's grip on his belt tightened. His instinct screamed at him to shut it all down, to hold the line. Then, the radio crackled to life again. "Officer Carter, urgent update. Dr. Parker's credentials confirmed. Transplant team awaiting her arrival. Time-sensitive mission. Release immediately." Ethan's stomach twisted. Emily saw it too, the way his stance faltered, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. But it was too late. She slammed her foot against the patrol car's door. "Damn it, move!" she screamed. The girl's heart was running out of time. And now, so was Ethan. For the first time that night, Officer Ethan Carter felt his confidence waver. The radio's confirmation echoed in his ears, each word hammering at the wall of certainty he had built around himself. Dr. Parker's credentials confirmed. Transplant team awaiting her arrival. Time-sensitive mission. He had been wrong. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some criminal trying to talk her way out of trouble. This wasn't another reckless driver making excuses. This was a doctor, an actual surgeon, who had been telling the truth all along. And because of him, because of his stubbornness, precious minutes had been wasted. Emily's voice cut through his thoughts, raw with anger and desperation. "You don't get it, do you? That little girl might not make it because of you." Ethan swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he reached for his keys. His pulse pounded in his ears as he fumbled to unlock the door. Click. The cuffs fell away from Emily's wrists, leaving behind deep red marks where they had dug into her skin. But she didn't stop to rub them. She didn't waste a second. She bolted. Ethan barely had time to react before she ripped open the car door, grabbed her black medical bag, and took off in a full sprint toward her car. The urgency in her movements shook him to his core. She wasn't thinking about arguing, about demanding an apology, about making him feel guilty. None of that mattered to her. Only the child did. Ethan's instinct screamed at him to move. Without thinking, he lunged forward and ran after her. "I'm coming with you," he shouted, surprising even himself. Emily didn't stop to argue. She threw herself into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and fired up the engine. Tires screeched against the asphalt as she whipped the car back onto the highway, speedometer needle jumping as she pushed the limits. Ethan barely had time to buckle his seatbelt before they were racing toward the airport. 9 minutes left. 8. His mind was spinning, heart hammering in his chest. For so long, he had believed he was a man of justice, a protector, someone who upheld what was right. But tonight, he had nearly cost a child her life because of his own prejudices. He stole a glance at Emily. Her knuckles were white against the steering wheel, her jaw clenched so tightly he thought she might crack a tooth. Then, the distant sound of rotor blades. The helicopter. A glimmer of hope. Emily slammed on the brakes as they reached the tarmac, the medical team already waiting, hands outstretched. Without a word, she threw open the door, grabbed the bag, and sprinted toward them. Ethan sat frozen, watching her disappear into the chaos. His breath was shaky. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Ethan sat motionless in the passenger seat, the sound of the helicopter blades echoing in his ears as he watched Dr. Emily Parker disappear into the swarm of medical personnel. The black bag, the very thing he had doubted, was now in the hands of the surgical team, being rushed toward the emergency operating room. And he had almost cost that little girl her life. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, suffocating. He had spent years believing he was protecting the law, upholding justice, doing what was right. But tonight, he had been the obstacle. His own blind spots, his prejudices, his need for control, had nearly turned him into the very thing he claimed to stand against. He swallowed hard, gripping the edges of his seat. Then, the moment of truth. A voice crackled through one of the medical radios nearby. "Heart is prepped. We're beginning the transplant now." Ethan exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He hadn't completely failed. There was still a chance. Emily emerged a few minutes later, exhaustion written all over her face, her shoulders slumped from the sheer weight of the night's events. But in her eyes, there was something else, determination. The fight wasn't over yet. Ethan stepped forward, opening his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could he even say? "I'm sorry" felt too small. "I was wrong" didn't seem enough. Emily didn't wait for an apology. She walked right past him, her focus locked on the hospital. There was still work to be done. And Ethan? He could only watch. The days passed, but the weight of that night didn't fade. Ethan found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror of his precinct's locker room, wondering how he had let himself become so lost. He thought about that little girl, how she had almost died because of him. He thought about Emily, how she hadn't wasted a second on anger, only action. That was real courage. That was real justice. For the first time in years, Ethan did something he never thought he would. He sat in front of his computer and typed out a letter. "Dr. Parker, I was wrong. No excuse I give can justify what I did that night. I let my own judgment cloud the truth, and I wasted time that you didn't have. That little girl deserved better. You deserved better. I can't change what happened, but I can change what happens next. I want to be better. I will be better. Thank you for not giving up, even when I failed you. Ethan Carter." He didn't sign it with his badge number. He didn't need to. Weeks later, Emily received the letter. She read it once. Then again. A slow breath left her lips. Change didn't come easy. But sometimes, it started with a single step.